All right, so this is going to be our fourth quadra video out of four on delta quadra. Quadra is a group of four types that have the same valued information elements and the same unvalued information elements, thus forming a sort of society where people understand each other, even though the types can be different in temperament and strengths and just general vibe. For the delta quadra, the four types are LSE, EII, IEE, and SLI. The four elements that are valued are TE, FI, NE, and SI. The four elements, therefore, that are unvalued are FE, NI, SE, and TI. Oh no, that was slightly out of order, but correct. As with the other three quadra videos, I'm going to think about this in terms of pairs of valued elements, one perceiving and one judging, and pairs of unvalued elements. And hopefully that'll tell us something about the shared inclinations of the types in the quadra, as well as sort of how much various parts apply to them. The first pair we'll consider will be delta, sort of so-called delta extroversion, which is NE and TE combined. You can sort of think of this just as the general need to improve things, to be better, to do better. Taking processes and sort of turning them into better processes. Just coming up with ideas for how to do stuff. How to get where you want to go in sort of a nicer, smoother way. So the types that are going to embody this the most are the two delta extroverts, the IEE and the LSE. For the IEE, they're NE lead and TE mobilizing. So their minds are always active with new ideas and novel approaches, and sort of this important secondary piece of their personality is the need to feel like they're accomplishing something productive, that they're being sort of reality based and empirical, though that side is not quite as strong. And for the the LSE, it's switched. They really are these natural realists who can complete tasks and function as the secondary side, where they really are very open, very teachable, very willing to reconfigure things as the situation calls for. So this is really a core thing for those two types. And for the two introverted types, it's more of a seeking thing. It's a sort of a road into their suggestive function. For the EII, they have the NE creative. So they are these sort of open-minded learners, and so that can be applied outward to their suggestive function TE, that it helps them to be able to execute on things better, to become more efficient, to do things in sort of a more objectively good way, which is a bit unnatural for them on its own. They really like to soak in this atmosphere of building a better mousetrap. Sort of people who really want to improve how they do things. Similar for SLI, but in reverse. SLI with their creative TE sort of has this competence, execution, optimization side of them down well. But the NE, where they really sort of break out of their rut, break out of their little patterns, and really start to rethink things from scratch. That's a little bit more uncharacteristic, but when it's placed in this TE framing, it's like good. It's like these people really value excellence. They value doing a good job. Like let me join this. Let me participate in this. Increased productivity, like increased skill. Like we're all getting better. That's good. So that's the delta extrovert element pair. The second pair I'll think about is this delta NF pair. So that's Ne plus Fi. Those combined is sort of this interplay where you want to learn more about yourself, understand who you are, understand your own emotional core, your own emotional stuff, and sort of expand that outwards in terms of who you are. Are there more sides of you? Uh, you know, what can you sort of figure out about your way of being in the world? Other people's way of being in the world, harmonizing those things together, like bringing that back to understanding what it is to be a person. And this is something that's fully embodied in the delta NF types, the IEE and EII. For the IEE, it is a much more outward thing. Like they really are, always trying to gravitate towards new experiences, towards learning new things. They're often just really fascinated by other people's problems and dilemmas. Can sort of play psychologist to them. Uh, just be fascinated by new people. Fascinated by learning things about themselves, understanding their own way of being in the world. Just these endlessly curious people. For the EII, the sort of introverted side of that axis predominates. They're very much about uh, this solid and grounded but open emotional self, where they really want to, they do want this open process of looking outwards with the NE, but they have a more limited set of topics. Understanding the core of themselves, on really looking uh, into the core of others, especially close others. And sort of being. I think of it as EIIs are often in the business of being a person, figuring out how to be a person, figuring out how other people are a person. If that sounds odd to you, it may sound odd because you're a type that doesn't do this as much, and you're like, what is that? Or it may sound odd because you're a type that does do that a lot, and it's like, who do people not do that? Yes, there are people who don't do that. Beta STs, that's uncharacteristic of them. That's part of what's cool about typology, that you can really answer no to some of these "isn't everyone like that" questions. Yeah, so for the delta STs, this NE plus FI, uh, that's their super id block. It's what they're seeking from others. So it's not as prominent a piece in their personality. For the LSE, uh, the NE side of it is the easier side to latch onto. This really sort of, you know, open mental space where you're willing to try things, willing to explore things. That's something they can turn on for a while. The FI side of it is much more confusing to them. They're often just a little bit, they know what they can do, but they're less sure about who they are. Uh, they're not sure necessarily like what their feelings mean, if they're allowed to have them. They can make very strange personal and relationship choices. They can sometimes male LSEs have these strange idealization things going on. Um, and but they fit in very well to an atmosphere where people like Delta NFs uh, can really open up this space about who they are and what they want and what it is to be human. Uh, that's like they're like, oh, I haven't thought about that. I should think about that more. Life isn't just work. Who am I? And for SLIs, it's similar, but their road into this stuff is the FI. They're more likely to have some understanding of their preferential self, to have some strong impulses around their gut morality and what they want. They still need a push on that, but just the self opening, the idea of sort of being more of being open to alternate ways to see other people, to really like uh, to to understand these novel human aspects of situations they encounter. That's trickier, uh, and they really, being around like frequent prompts to this, it makes them feel like their world is not so constrained, not so dull, that they really could be a lot of things if they so chose. That other people are maybe more interesting than they thought. That they can go and take a look around. So that's how that delta NF dynamic with the IEE and EII as leaders sort of works. Now let's think about the delta ST, those two elements. That's TE combined with SI. And that's, you can sort of think of that as a sort of quiet competence. It's something that really does get things done, really does make progress, but also will sweat the details along the way. Will make sure that everything's right. We'll just sort of have this commitment to quality because it's the right thing to do, even if it's not always, the strategic thing to do, or the fun thing to do, because that's NI and FE really. Um, yeah. Um, so this is something that the delta ST types embody. LSEs are just tend to be natural masters at uh, getting things done, and getting things done well, at learning skills, often at teaching skills, at really just being these people who know the facts, who can get to doing things at a high level, and who garner respect for that. SLIs, have a similar thing going on, but the SI side predominates. They're usually people with a very strong attention to detail, who will be more finicky in their steps, who will really make sure to get things right, to do every step, uh, carefully and ergonomically. For the delta NFs, this process is not as natural to them, but it is something that they like to participate in and can be easily prompted to participate in. For the IEEs, the TE is the easier side into this. They like the idea of themselves, getting things done in a smart way, really like making progress on goals. That piece they're really missing is this SI uh, carefulness about what they're doing. They can be sort of spacey and disconnected from the process, and they sort of need to be gently brought back to it, which is something that delta STs can do in this nice non-aggressive way. And then IEs will be pleased that they're doing something real, something of high quality that they can be proud of. And same with EIIs, but their way in is different. Their SI is usually the better of those two. So they, you know, are often just fussier uh, about details. They do stop to notice things to really make sure everything is correct and nice. But that TE is a little bit farther away. This sort of need uh, to make progress, to go faster, to really like make sure that they're executing. They want to, but they're it goes against the FI way of being to some extent, where things are experienced personally first. But they're very happy when they're around people who they know will help get them where they need to go. Um, especially people who are also alert to that SI aspect and don't just frame it as some sort of abstract strategy thing like an LIE might over in gamma. So that's the delta ST axis, and the fourth of those delta axis would be the delta introversion, which is Fi plus Si. So that's sort of combining one's own personal preferences and relational attitudes, uh, with one's connection to tangible reality and surroundings. So that's sort of the sense of belonging, of loyalty, of attachment, of family. Connecting this emotional closeness to the actual physical space. And this is something that EII and SLI, the delta introverts, embody best. The EII will embody the relational part better of, really, um, caring about certain people who are closer to them, who matter to them. And then SI is something that supports that, being able to do nice things for them or try to make their environment nice or just like have sort of little nice monuments to their shared space together and meaningful objects, things like that. For SLI, it's switched. Their connection to place and habits and ways of being is a little bit stronger. But they're they tend to be uh, unemotional externally with their vulnerable FE, but there is this FI quiet river inside of them somewhere where certain people do matter, and the right people will be able to know that they matter, and they can sort of see how nice and how smooth SLI makes everything for them. Um, and for the delta extroverts, this Fi plus Si aspect is more of a seeking thing. It's a road into their into the suggestive function. For IEE, maybe they understand SI better when it's paired up with their creative function Fi. That if there's people I care about, maybe that should be expressed in this tangible, in this sensory, in this really felt way to make people feel cozy, to make people feel like they belong there. Um, and similarly for LSE, they understand that the SISI is their creative function. They really understand how to set things up nicely, how to be concerned about others' physical needs or physical states. And sometimes that's their way into this FI, to this uh, genuine thoughtfulness and caring about another's being as a person, which is not always natural for them, since their natural point that they gravitate towards is a much more task oriented space. So it's their way into that. So that's the delta quadra in terms of the valued functions. Now let's take these pairs over in beta quadra and see the way that deltas don't like those. So first, let's think of the beta extrovert element pair. That's Se plus Fe. That's sort of this very uh, energized, very active, pushy, hyped up. This sort of peak of human energy and will and power. The kinds of things that really changes the world. Um, and for the delta extroverts, they have a way into this pair with their demonstrative function. The LSEs really are good at pushing, good at getting things done. That kind of SE stuff. IEEs, are good at the FE side. They can be very energetic. They can be very charismatic, very influential. But combined with the other side, which is their role function, IEE is like, this seems a bit aggressive. LSE is like, this seems a bit over emotional. And for the delta introverts, it's more stressful than that because it involves their vulnerable function combined with their sort of meh ignoring function. For SLI, it's sort of like, oh gosh, like this is all so loud, just like shut them all up. Like, can't people just do their own thing and learn how to do stuff first before they complain about stuff and before they impose their stuff on everyone. It's like leave me alone. Or for EII, the this uh it's the more pushy side of it that bothers them. uh this sense that uh maybe we should work on ourselves, take the log out of our own eye before we start going around collecting eyeballs. I don't know, that was going somewhere. uh but yeah, that's that kind, this is not, delta is not the place where these powerful impulses find their peak. It is a quieter, more low-key, more personal place, even for the extroverts. um the next pair that's unvalued is this beta st pair, se plus ti. The delta STs can do this stuff. For the LSE, their natural push through qualities in the SE combined with at least some ability, to create a stable order and structure as necessary to support their TE initiatives. So they have that SE and some TI. For SLIs, it's reversed. They really can be very pedantic, can be very system based, can really emphasize some of that TI stuff, and have a little bit of SE, at least to defend their own territory and their own approaches, and their own right to work independently and competently. So this is not a problem for the Delta STs. On the other hand, they really wish for just this nice, uh, competent, uncontroversial workflow. They're not really looking for this, you know, there must be order, like let's like tame the chaos of all this stuff. It's more of a let's do what we can, but let's do it with integrity kind of thing. For the Delta NFs, this is much more foreign to their way of being. uh, IEEs are very resistant to the kind of bureaucracies, to the kinds of you know military order, to the kinds of very structured lifestyles that the beta STs can create. Um, and they're also just sensitive to the wielding of SE power because that's not what they're about. They're about this NEF. They're about understanding people first before you try to change them. And beta ST is all about change. It's about changing the world. Um, and for EII, it's sort of the other way around. The sort of use of force, this intrusion into people's bubbles, uh, that's the most jarring thing. But also, the focus on order and on regularity is just a different kind of morality than the EII has. The EII is more like, I'm going to check in with myself and see if I'm okay with this. Whereas that TIS morality is more like, let's do things the way that we said we would do them. Let's be rigorous in that. And those are two, very different ways to be a moral person, very, very different ways to be a consistent person. They don't mix. Uh, the next axis to talk about would be beta NF elements. That's FE and NI. This is sort of like this heightened emotional, spiritual vision. This sense of what's behind everything. Where the whole world is going as a people. What's you know these like currents that power people's lives, that power societies. It's very narrative, very novelistic. And so this in this axis, delta NFs can do this stuff. IEEs have four-dimensional FE. They very much, uh, can speak and act in a way that's makes people feel more energized, more live, more engaged, and they have at least some of that NI. So they have this perception of things unseen that powers it. But really, they're more uh, they're less interested in this unifying message and sort of more interested in less unified uh, people areas. They are more interested in the person in front of them and all the different ways that person might develop, rather than sort of taking that person's story and putting it into some larger meta story that gains and gains in expressive power. They don't like that. That feels like it wipes out individuals and puts in collectives, and they can be right about that, but they can also, too much of that philosophy, and everyone comes atomized and in their own little bubble, and nobody has anything much to believe in or anything like that. For EIIs, their NI is the demonstrative function that's four-dimensional. They're very alert to what's under the surface of things. They notice subtle shifts. They see where things are going. They, can sometimes be great uh, writers, creating these like vivid characters and really understanding where they all fit. And their FE emotionality is there too, but they're really, they are not interested so much in these currents behind what people are doing. Like they really want to see the person as they are, uh, to see inside to their actual desires, like as they would feel them themselves. Like they're not looking at these archetypes or patterns or symbols or bigger things behind people's desires. They're not looking for these big emotional moments that make it all worthwhile. They're about the smaller things than that. And for the delta STs, uh, this area is really alien. The LSEs are very much your consummate realists. Uh, they really tend to orient themselves in life based on what's really in front of them, what are real results. Uh, this makes them very effective. This often makes them very easy people to collaborate with. But it's sometimes like, if you tell them about this kind of stuff, uh, there's something behind what they're doing, and they need to notice it, and there's more than just all this data. Uh, they may look at you funny or be like, well, maybe, but what are you gonna do about it? Like everyone has something like that, I guess. You do you. Um, and the FE part that just solicits an eye roll also, because it's like, well, okay, so you feel this very strongly and you're expressing it very strongly, but like, why should I actually do this? Like, are there real reasons for it? Or is it just like your own like rhetorical power here? Why should I care about that? For SLI, that part is especially offensive. They really don't want to get swept into this uh, very energized, very emotionalized vision, but they neither do they want to leave their default of being observant to what's really there, this SI stuff. and instead have to turn to this well, what's the real one meta thing behind all the things you're seeing. That just seems like a dangerous and strange place to go. And there's maybe it's better for people to do something more real and not worry about that. And finally, there's the beta introversion, Ti plus Ni, sort of creating this meta philosophy that explains everything. That's really uh, takes the fabric of the universe and forms it into axioms. And this is something that the delta introverts have some foothold into. The SLI has four-dimensional TI. They're usually very clear and precise thinkers who can deal well with systematic approaches and things like that. But they would rather take that and turn it back to TE stuff. To use that in the world of reality and not to just in some grand conceptual scheme. And for the EII, it's the other way around. They're often very reflective, philosophical, sort of deep people, but they that depth is really meant to serve personal growth, self awareness. The real personhood part of life, not to feed some system, to turn it into some uh, to turn all of their interesting and layered insights into uh, something algorithmic. It just feels so dry and sort of wrong. Um, and for the delta extroverts, this stuff is even more remote. Um, LSEs, they're they're not really going to want to spend all of their energy on these metaphysical subtleties. It feels like time is short. There's things to do. When am I going to use this? It's just not the kind of information they're best receptive to. And similarly for IEEs, they're widely curious about various things, but they're not really going to want to uh, take the time and the pain to have this perfectly consistent, uh, totally expansive take on all things. There's new people to meet. There's new skills to learn. There's just various interesting thoughts and insights to have and share. And it just seems like why sit in your room for 5 hours, you know, making these giant diagrams of conceptual stuff and making sure that all of it lines up just so that seems like a little bit like someone who's not really living their life. So that's sort of the different aspects of beta space and how they don't fit here. So hopefully that provides some insight into deltas and how they're sort of bound together in different ways.